Hello class, welcome to our lesson. This is dealing with section 3.2, the extension of it, which deals with factoring expressions. Factoring is the opposite of distributing, much like adding is the opposite of subtracting, multiplication, division are opposites, squaring and square rooting are just a few examples of that type of idea in mathematics. So factoring, by definition, is the opposite or the opposite idea of distributing. So some questions will ask you to factor the expression using what's known as the greatest common factor, or GCF. To be honest, I don't think this first question does justice to really what the situation is talking about. This one has 9 plus 27, so you would find what number goes into both, and that would be 9, and put that out front. And then divide each portion by that number, and so 9 divided by 9 is 1, 27 divided by 9 is 3. To be honest, though, this probably isn't that helpful because if they're all numbers, why would we be using the distributive property anyway? It's probably more helpful on a question like the second one that has a 4 out front. Okay, so the reason I picked 4 is because 4 is the highest number that goes into both. So I put a 4 out front, and then I take 8x divided by 4 and 4 divided by 4, and that's what's left inside these parentheses. So that's why it's 2x minus 1. This next question is 26y plus 39x. So 13 goes into both, so I put 13 out front. And then divide both of these by 13, I get 2y plus 3x. Now notice the point of this is that if you take the 13 in the front and distribute it, you'll get back to 26y and back to 39x. The next one, the most common mistake is that you pick 7 because they're both divisible by 7. But if you notice that both numbers when you divide are both even, probably double the number that you're trying to factor out. And so instead of picking 7, maybe pick 14. And so if I pick 14, 14 divided by 4, or 14a divided by 14 is just a. And then 70b divided by 14 would be the 5. B, but don't forget that there's still a subtraction in between those as you're looking at that question. Instead of finding the greatest common factor and factoring it out, other questions may ask you to find the coefficient and factor it out. Remember, the coefficient is just the number in front of the variable, so this would be a 6 in this case. So they're telling you what number to factor out. So in this case, I'm going to take a 6 out front, and that leaves me then with x minus 5.5, because 6x divided by 6 is just x, and then 33 divided by 6 is 5.5. For the second one, I have 1.2z plus 4.8. I'm going to divide both of those by the coefficient, which is 1.2. So 1.2z divided by 1.2, what you'll notice is that that always just becomes one of those variables. And then 4.8 divided by 1.2 will be just 4. The next questions have fractions as coefficients, and so the most common mistake on those scenarios is you got to make sure that you take the fraction out front. The first term should just be x or whatever the variable is, like this one's y. But then it's the second part. You got to take the fraction that's given to you, which is 3 over 2, and divide by the coefficient of 1/2. Remember to do keep, change, flip, and that will be 3 over 2 times its reciprocal 2 over 1. That's why it's a 3. The second one would be 3/4, then multiply by the reciprocal of the coefficient, which would be 8/3, and that's why that's a plus 2. So there's two types of questions, greatest common factor and then coefficient questions. Why don't you take a little bit of time and try these 4 questions. They ask you to factor using the GCF. Go ahead and pause the video and try these 4 out and see if you can get the right answers. Here are the 4 answers for these questions. Most common mistakes, putting a minus sign versus a plus sign. So you want to make sure you keep track of that. Also, maybe you only took a 2 out of this one, but you should have taken a 32 out of it because they're both divisible by 32. And remember, GCF questions typically on the inside of parentheses should always be whole numbers and integers, not necessarily decimals on that inside portion of the parentheses. Again, take a few moments and try these 4 questions. They say to factor out the coefficient, which means every single time you're going to take the number in front of the variable and take that out as your factored form. Here are the 4 answers. Most common mistakes, realizing that you can have decimals and fractions inside of these parentheses. Let's look at this one here, 3/7, put it out front, and then y plus 3 over 35 divided by 3/7 would be 3 over 35 times 7/3. And that's where the plus 1/5 comes from. Also, don't forget if there's a minus sign, it should be a minus sign in the parentheses. And again, the goal is that these should look like distributive property questions at the end. That's what it means to be in factored form. Your homework today is a worksheet from section 3.1 through 3.4. Make sure you pay attention to what questions you should be looking at. The focus isn't really on factoring here. I'm just trying to introduce factoring today. So it's mainly a review of the 4 sections that we've looked at in Chapter 3 already. Make sure that you're looking at those questions to be ready for your upcoming test. Have a good day, everybody.